So welcome everyone. We'll call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Finance, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Stand or not as you see fit, appropriate. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, great. We'll start with the minutes, and I shout out to Tom. Hello? Okay. All right. Anyway, I was going to give a shout out to Tom, who did the minutes in Karen's absence last time. Did a very admirable job. Glad to have you back too, Karen, same time. I did have one change in middle of the fourth paragraph, or number 4, the cafe fund, I think is the cafeteria fund. That's not a big deal, but otherwise I thought they were fine. Anyone have any other major comments?
No major, Rob. I just, there was a comment under the facilities task force discussion that I said Tectron would be in July. I believe there was a discussion between Maria and I about trying to get Tectron in, and it looks like it'll be for August, but I did not definitively say that Tectron would be coming in July.
Okay. Well, there were a couple of reasons why that didn't happen tonight, but that's fine. I think at the meeting we talked about trying to get them in. So if you want to.
Yeah, I was expecting them.
Yeah. Change. All right. So I need a motion to adopt the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Hearing none. We will adopt the minutes. Next up is the finance director's report.
Rob, before we go to the next up, can I just interject? Can I add an agenda item, which is to ask for a little bit of update on the Meadowwood proposal?
Yeah, it's not on our agenda, but I was going to address it under communications or other business. So
perfect. That's fine.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Sort of where we are. All right. And maybe it'll come up in Amy's report. I don't know. So not really. All right. Amy, you're up.
Okay. So the first item, same as always, the grants and donations. This is just a list of grants and donations that were approved from the beginning of July until July 13th at the Board of Selectmen meeting. Under COVID-19 related items, under the tax deferment program, this program is now closed. We ended with a total of 93 applications, and we deferred about $850,000 in taxes. One other thing that I just wanted to share, which I shared with Rob and Lisa, which I just thought was really interesting, is that, pre-COVID, our advanced collections where people pay in advance, we typically receive around like $100,000, maybe max like a few $100,000. This year we received advanced collections of almost $10 million. So I don't know why, how come, what for, but it's super interesting that so many people paid early. So I just kind of wanted to do that. It was just very interesting. Under the COVID expenditures related to the general fund. So I just want to preface this with, this is the COVID impact only. It's not reflective of year-end results. We're still closing out year-end, but I just didn't want any confusion related to the fact that this data is as of June 30th. So
I was confused by that, Amy, by the sentence that was in there, because it is reflective of the year-end COVID results, right?
It's reflective as of June 30th, but closing out the year goes beyond June 30th. So we're
okay. I get it.
Still have July, has June activity, etc.
Okay.
These numbers could change. So our biggest loss is our library and our building rent revenue loss. Actually, no, that's not true. It's materials and supplies. However, the combination of the library revenue loss, and the building rent revenue is revenue loss due to the closings of the buildings. Under materials and supplies, the almost $23,000 is from our PPE supplies and also our cleaning supplies. We had additional staff and overtime for cleaning, and there was also some police overtime in there as well. And then we had a couple smaller expenditures related to technology, Zoom conference lines, and some soft phone lines for working remotely that we also had. So total expenditures and loss in revenue about $54,000. And then on the savings side, we had some staff savings as well as the conference and education savings since we couldn't go anywhere and everything was canceled. We canceled our referendum, which gave us some savings. And then this wasn't savings, but it was excess revenues that we didn't expect that we would get for land record revenue. This related to, we had so many house sales. And then in addition to the house sales, there was quite a few refinances on mortgages. So Erica saw a huge uptick of this when in the very beginning of COVID. So overall, a surplus to the general fund of about $31,000 on the town side. Moving on down to the Board of Education side, their athletics program did not happen in the springtime, so they lost that revenue. The materials and supplies, again, some PP&E, they had cleaning supplies, there's some signage in there. They had some distance learning supplies. And then also right at the end of the year, they're planning for next year, and they purchased a bunch of desks since typically the kids nowadays sit at tables, but now since we need to social distance, they did purchase a bunch of desks to be able to accommodate the upcoming school year. On the food programs, I just talked to the food services director. This $55,000 is expected to increase as she puts together her year-end numbers. So just to give you a heads up on that, this will be part of our year-end discussion when we release the year-end results.
And I have a question on that too, Amy. So I understand it'll be a loss in 2019 or 2020, excuse me. But you did say that all that food is been warehoused into the schools. So presumably that will create some savings in the coming year on the food budget?
I mean, it could, it depends. So
they won't have to buy that food.
Well, they don't have to buy the food, but remember last time we talked, the federal government has a requirement that they purchase so much food with federal dollars. So depending on what they can use for that food, the stuff that they purchase with our money, so to speak, is typically the fresher stuff. So if they could have stopped spending that, they did. And then also we're going to see most likely a loss in revenue next year too. I can't imagine that they're going to be doing the a la carte sales, but I have the financial analysis that'll be ready to go for year and then the individual buckets as to where we're kind of seeing some concern at this point.
Amy, would you be able to explain the athletic program loss?
Yeah, so this is their pay-to-play program. So they have their spring sports, which didn't happen, but they had already gotten ready for their spring sports. So the equipment purchases, uniforms, anything of that nature. And parents had paid, but then they had to be reimbursed, but we had already had the expenditures within there. So hopefully we're going to see this year some savings in that fund to kind of make up for some of that because we don't have to make the purchases again.
Okay.
Did they pay the coaches?
They did pay the coaches.
So I've heard two different stories. I've heard before during meetings that they didn't pay, but now that I'm hearing that they actually paid the coaches.
No, where there were some coach stipends paid out. I don't know if it was for related to the fall or the spring, but I can follow up on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Amy, I had two questions. I noticed that the town didn't list any utilities savings. Did we not have any? We closed the senior center, library's been, although staff is still there, Parks and Rec. Are there any utility savings on the town side?
No, there's no utility savings. Even though we closed the buildings to the public, the buildings were not closed to the staff. Staff was still coming in and out. And in discussions with Tom Roy, he couldn't make any adjustments to completely shut down a building with the amount of use that it needed for staff in order to achieve any savings.
Okay. And then under Board of Ed, I don't see any designations for FEMA reimbursements. Are any of the materials and supplies or any of the spends there reimbursable?
So right now we are in flux. They sent out the application for the state. So for on the town side, we have to apply for FEMA reimbursement, and then we can apply to the state for any reimbursement that FEMA doesn't cover. So that 25%. On the Board of Ed side, they're asking us to use our state money first, which is about $97,000, and then to apply for FEMA after that money is gone. They told us that they were sending out the application. We did get an application, and then all of a sudden we got notification, please don't submit the application, it's going to change, and we have heard nothing after that point. So, and it's probably been a couple of weeks now. So I don't know if they're coming back out with the application, if they're going to release the funds, if they're not going to release the funds. So we're kind of just at a standstill based on their last email of, please don't complete the application, you're going to be blocked. We'll follow up later.
How much of the spend there do you think would be eligible for either state or FEMA reimbursement?
Well, according to the early estimates that the state gave, it's $97,000 that we're supposed to get. And then anything above and beyond that we're able to apply for FEMA for, it would be none of the revenue losses are going to be covered. We could probably get technology, the PP&E, the cleaning, and probably the staff overtime as well, because it related to that. So pretty much everything except for the food program and the athletics for the Board of Ed side I would submit for. But again, we don't know what they're going to cover. I just submitted for the town last week, so we're just waiting to hear back as to what their determination is on what they're going to cover and what they're not.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, moving on.
So bottom line, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, it's probably still too early to tell. I know optimistically people are thinking that kids will be going back to school buildings. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but there's 169 towns in this state that are all required by the state to pay a certain amount for food. I would imagine that if this persists, that maybe there'll be a change to that requirement to continue to buy food that we're not going to, use. So.
I mean, we hope so. We're definitely going to work with the director. My God, I just lost her name, Lori, and see if we can reach out to some of those agencies to see if the requirement can either be waived or reduced, or that's definitely something that we're looking into doing.
Thank you.
Amy, so what happens to the $560,000 net surplus there? Does that go into general fund, or where?
Yeah, so the $560,000, so this is just the COVID impact. There was some special education loss, so that's going to be less. I think the last time we looked at it, it was about $200,000 in savings. And that's definitely something that would go back into the general fund. But if you look at the next page, they've actually already had COVID-related expenditures for reopening school. So chances at year end, we're probably going to be requesting that we are able to keep those savings for the Board of Ed, so that we can accommodate the purchases that basically have already been made to accommodate the state's plan to reopen. Which segues nicely into the next page. So as of right now, we've spent about $140,000 in COVID-related expenditures to prepare for opening these schools, mainly related to technology and the compliance around that. There's about $120,000. So the Board of Education was notified that they need to develop 3 different plans, and they have to be ready to go with each one of those plans, no matter what the governor decides. So one is total social distance at-home learning. The other one is a hybrid of in school and out of school. And then the other one is just back to school full time. So they had additional technology purchases in case we do have to do school remotely. And then in addition to that, kids had previously been sharing devices, which they'll no longer be able to do. And then also the $140,000 is what's spent. However, the plan has not been put into place in full force yet, so we still have additional expenditures coming. They're looking to get the purchase of shields for the students and the teachers. And then I believe they were looking into some tents or something along that line to put at the high school for some outdoor learning in order to social distance that way, since the high school is the hardest place to be able to have cohort learning, which is something that they're striving for. And then the last item under the COVID, Lisa asked me to just put together something related to the Parks and Rec revenue, which is actually going to end up. As you can see, we did have a loss in some of the special programs and the activities at the complex just due to our closure. But the golf course did well. They had revenues in excess of budget of about $70,000. So just, preliminarily, we're looking at about a $200,000 loss in revenues alone. Any questions related to that? Okay. Under the body-worn cameras and the car cameras, I don't know if you recall, but at our last meeting, I let you know that we were most likely going to be coming forth to this meeting with a request to be able to purchase the body cameras and the car cameras and ask for that funding. However, after we had this meeting, there were subsequent discussions at the state level that we found out about. And state elected officials are actually having an upcoming special session to discuss body cameras and whether those are going to be mandated in all municipalities, and if there's going to be any state funding available for those. So we are going to hold off on this request until we find out what the state determines, if they are going to mandate and if they are going to give us funding for that project. So just wanted to let you know why it's not on the agenda, and let you know that it may be coming, it may not be coming. We'll give you an update on what the state determination is. And
Amy, just a quick question. We currently don't have in the police force any body cams or car cams or
Car cams.
what?
we have car cameras. We do not have body cameras.
Okay.
And then the last item is the Connecticut GFOA. The president of the Connecticut GFOA had reached out asking if I would join their board of directors. And then I was voted in June. So effective July 1st, I am one of their directors on their board going forward for a 3-year term.
Well deserved.
That's all I got.
Okay. Our next agenda item is the police private duty fund use of proceeds proposal.
So I'll kick this one off, and then Maria and the chief can jump in as they see fit. So last time at the Board of Finance meeting, we had the review of the special revenue funds and what each fund was supposed to be used for. And one of those funds obviously was the police private duty fund. So our recent research found that those funds, any excess funds at the end of the year, should be going into the general fund. But since the general fund balance is at an appropriate level, we'd like to propose an alternative use of these funds. So just related to the police vehicles, they have a police vehicle fund. And this fund is used to replace their admin vehicles. Their admin vehicles are not on a set schedule. They weren't part of regular turnover where they were being purchased regularly. It's just when the funds would build up in this fund from the sale of vehicles, that's when they would purchase a new admin vehicle. So in doing it this way, their vehicles are basically being run to the ground prior to replacement, definitely exceeding their useful life in years and mileage. So one thing that we would like to use the police private duty fund for is to put these vehicles on a schedule and utilize this funding so that we're staying current with the purchase of the admin vehicles at about 2 a year. If you turn and look at the chart that is in the second page of the agenda submission, we are requesting that the fund balance in this fund remain at about $100,000. And the reason for that is if you look at that decrease to fund balance from 2017 to 2020, you can see that our increase is anywhere from $20,000 to $93,000. So in the $90,000 years, we'll have more than enough to purchase the admin vehicles. However, in the years like fiscal year 17, where it's only $20,000, we might need a little help from fund balance until we can replenish enough with a good year in order to be able to still purchase those vehicles on a regular schedule. What else do I have for this? Oh, and so
Amy, my question is, do we have to have different language about the fund balance being sent over to the general fund?
Nope. So if you are all in support of it tonight, basically by voting on this and having this language as it's written, that's all you need to do. It just supersedes any language that was written before on the usage of the fund. There's nothing specific about the general fund other than the initial memo, I believe, that the finance director, Kevin, wrote at the time.
So I just have a couple of comments and questions. I think what you propose is a reasonable way to get from $400,000 fund balance down to 100, which is manageable. But I wonder if, we don't do something like this for the trucks in the Department of Public Works. And if these admin vehicles have a useful life or an appropriate period of time that we should own them and then replace them, why should they be treated any differently than any other depreciating asset that we replace on a regular basis? I guess that's just, I don't see the rationale for having these vehicles being treated differently. And one quick question for the chief: are these vehicles equipped in any way that is materially different than just buying a regular sedan for use by driving? These are not, they don't have other equipment like the patrol cars and everything else. Or is that correct, or am I wrong in that assumption?
Amy, did you want to answer that first part, or did you want me to answer the last question?
Well, let's start with the last part. So are they just regular automobiles? Okay.
For the most part, they are just regular automobiles. What we've had to do in the past is when one of the cars has died and we haven't had enough funding to purchase a new one, we've removed a car from service, and instead of selling it, a cruiser that's bought as a cruiser, instead of selling that, we have stripped it of the and some of the emergency equipment that you see on the outside, and we've used that for a year or two to get us by. For the most part, these are normal everyday civilian vehicles, but they are equipped with emergency lights and siren and a police radio. Otherwise, they're no different than a car that anybody else could purchase.
Good. And then how long do we keep them, and why should we treat them differently than we would other capital assets that we buy?
Sure. So how long we keep them, in the past, we've kept them until we've seen some issues coming up. And so I'll give you for instance, 2014, we had 2 or 3 cars just die, and they were all within a month or two of each other. One was a transmission. It was going to be about $4,000 to replace that, along with something else that was pending. It wasn't worth it because the car was 8 to 10 years old. So traditionally, we have kept the cars anywhere from 6 to 10 years, and again, until they have a problem. We had a transmission die. We had another problem that I don't know what it was. The car just stopped working. So obviously, these have to be reliable vehicles. To your point of why we're doing it differently, I can't answer that. I don't know why we're treating these assets differently.
I got that one, Chief.
Thank you.
The reason that these are different, so to speak, is basically just because the funding is available. So theoretically, the way that I assume, I do not know, I was not here, but I assume that they created a premium, if you will, above and beyond the pay of the police officer, is because the police officers are using their equipment, they are using their vehicles during these private duty sessions, if you will. So theoretically, we should be charging that profit in order to put it back in to replace our equipment, to replace our vehicles, because there is wear and tear associated with the private duty that we're performing. So I don't know which types of vehicles, and the chief can answer this, are actually going out on private duty if it is a police patrol vehicle, but the police patrol vehicles are already covered under CNR. So if it is a patrol vehicle, theoretically, the right way to do it would be to take the patrol vehicles out of this fund and take the admin vehicles out of CNR. However, this fund would not be able to support 3 vehicles a year. So, and I wouldn't recommend messing with CNR. It's already in a really good spot the way it's set up. So this is just an opportunity of money that we have coming in that's available that the police department is able to generate that kind of helps us out with the vehicle purchase for the admin vehicles.
Amy, how often are you replacing this new schedule? It was 6 to 10. What are you proposing and how many vehicles are there?
Right.
So we have to go through this, and we're going to put something together on year-end results if this is something that you all are supportive of. But the chief was able to identify 3 vehicles right now that are either 2011 through 2014, and they all have excess of 100,000 miles on them, and they are ready to be out of commission if the money is available.
So, no, but my question is total. How many admin vehicles are there?
Right.
Chief?
Yeah, so right now there are 7 admin vehicles.
And who uses them?
I use one. Right now, the 2 lieutenants each use one. And then we have 3 assigned to detectives and then the detective sergeant.
And then can you talk to me a little bit? You have in the memo that they're 50,000 to replace, but there is a trade-in value. So the true cost is not 50. Is that correct?
Pretty close.
Yeah,
Not much trade-in for a 7-year-old 100,000 mile car, right?
There's not, and the patrol cars themselves, and that I can give you a better number for, but 5,000 miles, we're getting like 3,000, 3,500 on the return for those. So there isn't a big resale on them.
So how are you getting 50,000 though? Because I don't know anyone who spends that much on a regular car, obviously without the lights.
Right.
So Chief did give me the information for the last time, which was about 3 years ago, he said, and it was almost $40,000 plus the cost to outfit. So with the cost to outfit and then the actual the vehicle itself now, I would assume is probably with, the way prices have gone up anywhere between $42,000 to $45,000. And then also as part of that proposal, you'll see that there was some proposed usage for their body armor and their vests, which make up pretty much the difference. So we just use that $50,000 round number to give us some leeway in the fund balance in case we like in one of those years in fiscal year 17 where we only had the $20,000.
So I have a question too about if there are only 7 vehicles and you're talking about replacing 2 of them every year, they only have to be 3.5 years old and you're going to replace them? I mean, how much use? They don't get as much use as a patrol car, right?
They do not get as much use as a patrol car. And what happens is we end up replacing those cars that do get a lot of miles. We end up sort of shuffling those down to the detectives because they do not put on those significant miles.
Right.
So we wouldn't be interested in purchasing a new car to then sit for a year and get 3,000 to 5,000 miles on it. And then, have it sort of rot out before we've got, any really good use out of it. So we end up shuffling the cars around, quite frequently.
And also we're backed up right now because there are some cars that do need to be replaced, which was the thought behind that.
So once we get on schedule though, how often are you going to be replacing the cars?
I assume it would be the same frequency as maybe like the patrol cars. I don't know, Chief. I would actually.
They don't get as much use.
No.
So I don't expect that it would be quite as often. So looking at the list right now, we have 2 cars that are from 2017. We have 3 from 2014. So in the past, what's happened is unfortunately, like 2 or 3 have died all in the same year. So if we can somehow, we have one that's a 2011. If we can somehow get on a better schedule, I would expect that, down the line, we're looking at one car a year down the line. But right now, they're all starting to build up. We have 72,000, 135, 97, 114, 83,000. And one of those with the 83,000 was an old patrol car. So that thing's been running for the last couple of years.
So you think the 6 years would be a fair estimate for replacement time?
6 years, yeah.
6 to 7 with 7 cars.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, sorry, and I have to say my thing keeps freezing up. So I don't like Zoom meetings. I just missed everything that got said for the last 30 seconds. But so apologies if I turn into a frozen statue again. I want to go back to Kevin's question earlier, which I also, have a concern that we have a policy, and that policy was that the money was supposed to go back to the general fund. And we don't actually have to adopt anything, and it could go back to the general fund. And then, like all capital requests, these cars, and I'm not saying they don't need to be replaced, but they should be judged by the Board of Selectmen and prioritized in the light of other capital needs. Because I feel like if we segregate this money and say, well, only the police get to use it, that takes the power away from the Board of Selectmen to judge, well, wait a minute, do we need a new police car more than we need something else in this particular year? And I'm not comfortable with that.
So that's not the intent. The reason to keep it out of the general fund is because we already have a significant and healthy position on the fund balance. Anything above and beyond that 100.
We are heading into a very bad year. So we have a healthy position right now. Who knows what's coming?
And that's something to take into consideration when we talk about year end. However, the current position that we're in is a very healthy position. And even at year end, I still think that we're going to be in a healthy position. This fund just allows us to take care of some of our capital on a regular basis. And then if we are above and beyond where these needs aren't needed, then per the request, this money would go into the capital reserve fund to be used for all capital. It just wouldn't be used for operating, is what we're trying to stay away from, because we are in a healthy position and our capital is not in a great position. So we would rather have anything excess. So for example, just let me run you through a quick scenario. If we go to the Board of Selectmen during the budget, these admin vehicles, as stated in here, are going to be on that capital plan now. So if they prioritize and say, nope, we don't think the chief should get it, we think he should wait for 8 years, then it's absolutely their right to say, okay, we want to put this money from the private duty fund into the capital reserve fund and use it for capital needs. It's not just because you're adopting the use of these funds tonight doesn't mean that you can't. I mean, I guess that's why we worded it the way that we did. It can be used for equipment. It can be used for police vehicles. It can go into the CNR fund. We're just trying to eliminate it going into the general fund.
So why not then just put it in why create this other police?
I think, Linda, you're frozen.
Mm-hmm.
Is everybody else? Yeah, Linda is frozen.
Linda, are you back?
She is.
I think, Linda, where I'm
I lost you all, sorry.
We lost you. Linda, we lost that entirely.
So I was, Lisa and I had talked about this earlier. Why not just put the money into the capital reserve fund and then let the Board of Selectmen on an annual basis prioritize? And I'm sure the police will be one of the priorities, but that gives them the annual ability to deal with that rather than putting it in this segregated fund.
So putting it in the capital reserve fund, putting it in the capital plan already gives them that the way to do it. It's not automatically authorizing the purchase of these vehicles every year, but on the capital plan next to it, as a course, you're going.
Yeah, so that I think that's the distinction that we're trying to make here is that I'm hearing sort of two different things. Let me see if I can try to sort this out. I think what Amy is saying is we want to keep $100,000 in this fund, and everything else will automatically go to the general fund. Is that correct if the fund balance is higher?
Yes.
And that among the acceptable uses of that $100,000 would be to buy equipment, including admin vehicles, as opposed to the interpretation that some of us may have had, which is that first priority of this money is to buy the admin vehicles, which are outside, and that transfers the discretion to spend this money to the police outside of the budgeting process for the whole town. And I think that's not the case, right, Amy?
No, that is not the case at all. It's just when we put together the capital plan, when we put together these admin vehicles, the funding source next to it is going to be listed as police private duty.
But why keep a separate fund? Why not just list the funding source as the capital fund? There's an inference when it has a title like the police vehicle fund that's what it's for.
Oh, we're getting rid of the police vehicle fund.
We're getting rid of the police vehicle fund, but for
so that's the confusion. The money comes into the special duty fund, right? Is that what's it called? The
private duty fund.
Private duty fund. So the money is the police department gets money revenue from the things they do in the private duty fund. And then what we're saying is that I think the change we're trying to make is we're going to get rid of the vehicle fund.
Right, but you're going to keep something with a title of the police private duty fund with $100,000.
Correct.
Which has an inference, and that's my only point, is if it says it's the police fund, everybody 10 years from now, when all of us are gone, is not going to remember that this is actually supposed to be able to be used for anything. And just like we've experienced that the money never went back to the general fund, we're going to have people saying, well, this is police money. And so we don't get to spend it on anything else. I think it's taking power away from the Board of Selectmen. I don't care what they spend it on. That's the Board of Selectmen's job. But I think sticking it in a separate fund with a separate title makes it harder down the road to be clear that, well, they say police.
So, Amy, is your point that I think you made a couple of times, and I hear what you're saying, Linda. I'm not trying to cut you off, but I'm trying to say your point is that we're trying to not just have all of the money in the general fund, because to the extent that we can have money designated in other funds, that's a better place for those to be. And then we can discuss the difference between this fund or transferring it to a capital, the capital fund.
Yeah, all capital purchases come out of the capital fund. The private duty fund is just going to be a funding source for those capital purchases. But we can't get rid of the private duty fund. This is a special revenue fund that collects money for private duty and then officers out of that. So those excess funds need to go somewhere. So we're proposing that they be used for capital. So when we develop our capital plan during the budgeting process, we're asking you to be able to put private duty fund as a funding source next to the police admin vehicles. That's basically all it comes down to. And then the Board of Selectmen says yay or nay, the Board of Finance says yay or nay, and then the budget gets passed.
Amy, I had a question. So I understand the rationale, and it's sort of like the cruisers. There's a constant replacement need in the plow trucks, so it does make sense to have a consistent funding. But the question, going to Linda's point, is could you, and you have to have some in the reserve fund because it pays the officers. It's a cash flow thing. Sure. But then the excess, could it go into the capital reserve fund and accomplish the same thing either by designating it per the Board of Selectmen's choice or by earmarking it to the police instead of having one fund to both do cash flow and collect profit? Why not take all the profit and put it in the capital reserve? It's more an accounting thing. It's not a control thing because you will have the same designation. It would just be a slightly different accounting designation in the capital reserve fund. It would be an earmarked fund. Can you speak to why or why not that would or wouldn't work?
And can I just add a comment to that? And that is, you don't need $100,000 to deal with the cash flow part. I mean, you probably need a month or maybe 2 months worth of typical police repayment for their time, but you're billing people, Simscroft, Echo, or whoever, construction companies, and they're paying you. So you don't need a whole $100,000 in there in order to make sure that the police get their paychecks. for the private duty part. You're asking for the 100 grand so that you can do that for cars.
So, I mean, it kind of goes to both. So if we have a cash flow year where that fund only makes $20,000, we're basically asking to use that fund balance to be able to purchase anything within the capital, if you will, like an admin vehicle, so that we could still make that purchase and use that fund balance and not have to go out to bond.
Yeah, but why, Mike, going back to my question, you can still do that if it's in the capital reserve and it's
Right.
specially designated police or you've earmarked it police. That's my question is, why doesn't that also accomplish the same thing and it keeps the purposes of the two funds kind of segregated?
It is the same thing. So when we're putting together our capital plan, it's like the police vehicles are actually physically being purchased out of the capital fund.
No, I'm talking the capital reserve fund, not the capital fund. When we put money aside for purchases?
Right. So basically, we're just asking you to approve the use of these funds so that when we put together our capital plan, we can put the private duty fund as a source of revenue. We can put it as the capital reserve fund, but we already know at year-end closeout what we're going to have for the private duty fund. So, I mean, we could do the extra step and remove it from the private duty fund, put it in capital reserve, and then put it into capital. But this way, it's just going from the private duty fund to the capital to pay for the vehicles.
So it accomplishes the same thing. It's just an accounting ease for you. Is that sort of the thinking there? There's no, I mean, it's not like it takes anything away. Nick, I'm talking accounting. I'm not talking about who has control of the money. It's
Right.
where to designate it. So this isn't about should you do it, but is that just what it comes down to? It's easier for you to do it the way you proposed?
Yeah, it's basically, you know, we've identified something that has not been on a regular schedule that needs to be replaced more often before it dies. We have the funding available. So we're basically saying, can we transfer the excess funds from this fund into the capital fund to pay for, say, these vehicles? And then if we have too much money that we don't know what to do with above and beyond that $100,000, then we would transfer it to the reserve fund until we have a use for it during the budget cycle, the next budget cycle or current budget cycle, whatever we want to use it for.
And do we even need 100,000 in there? Because that's 2 cars a year. And I thought I heard Nick say we really only need 1 a year.
Well, we need 1 a year after we've caught up.
After you catch up.
Yeah.
But you'd be creating a permanent policy of putting 100,000 in there, even though in a few years, once you've caught up, that won't really be necessary. I personally, I would rather just see it, you know, the excess go into the capital reserve fund and let the Board of Selectmen catch up or do whatever they need to, and then get you on a schedule and just pay it out of normal capital reserve money. But that's my 2 cents worth.
I tend to agree with Linda on it. But the Board of Selectmen is supposed to be choosing where the funds go and how the capital is being spent.
All right, so we've heard from maybe Derek, do you have a point of view on this?
It really doesn't matter to me, as long as, you know, we need, you know, updated cruisers on the road with, you know, less than hundreds of thousands of miles on them. So, you know, I'm fine with the Board of Selectmen kind of designating where the money goes. I mean, acknowledging that, you know, they're going to have to make the same decision regarding where to, whether to spend the money on the cruisers or not. I'm indifferent.
Okay, and Art?
Yeah, I think, it does. Is it kosher to talk to the Board of Selectmen, get his point of view on this thing while he's attending this meeting? I mean, I do see the logic of that, in the sense of they're making a capital allocation. Go ahead and put it there so they can.
Right.
Now, it has been reduced to 100,000. I'm just wondering, what is the appropriate amount that would be usable to make the accounting process for Amy a lot easier? And it seems like 100 is a little high. When you start getting $100,000, you're getting into the prerogatives of the Board of Selectmen to make such decisions. And so I guess I like the flexibility of a fund for such things, but this seems high. And so I guess I come down with Linda and Kevin on this.
Amy, what is the cash flow that's needed to keep this fund solvent to pay officers? Is it a 3-month reserve?
No, so we always collect in excess of what we need for the officers. It might be like a timing difference, but there's nothing related to, we've never had any cash flow issues. The reason for the fund balance is for the years where the fund doesn't make enough to support the vehicles. So $20,000 in 1 year is not going to get us what we need to replace the vehicles.
But then the Board of Selectmen would apply some money from capital reserves to make that up, and that's their job.
They very well could.
And let me just ask the chief, you've been listening patiently. Is there anything we've said that is you take great exception with?
No, I just think Amy, makes a good point that, in 2017, there was $20,000 of revenue, and 2018, there was 22,000. So over the course of 2 years, you may have reached the cost of one car. But I hear what you're saying as far as the Board of Selectmen having that ability to approve those funds. Where this is a bit of a change from the past is all of a sudden these admin cars have died. And I recall in 2014, 2 died within like a week and a half of each other. And the way that it was set up then, we had the option, or we had the availability just to replace those cars as soon as we could. So, this process may be a little bit more lengthy. It may be a little bit more, I don't want to say challenging, but it may be a longer process for us to do this. But, ultimately, I feel that, the cars will be purchased. The need is definitely there. These are not for recreation. These are to be able to properly supervise the department, to respond to emergencies, to respond on, during outside hours, or to investigate. They're not a patrol car. So I think it will be funded. I'm just concerned that the process may be too much.
Well, either way, it's going to be
It's going to be the same process either way. Yeah. And I would go so far as to say, Nick, this isn't at all about not wanting you guys to have the equipment that you need. Right. I'm sure you know. But, we all support that. We want you to be well heeled in your vehicles. And there is this sort of newfound money, so to speak. And if there's a big catch up, maybe some of that should be used to do some catch up. You're saying you've got a vehicle from 2011. That's pretty old. But that's a different thing than setting up a permanent. I think we all want it to be on a schedule going forward, and
sure. Yep. Yeah, no, I agree that a schedule is definitely something that would be better for all of us. But if we were to replace, say, the fleet right now, which we don't need, but say say we were to replace 5 vehicles right now, that just means in 6 to 8 years we'd then be looking to replace that many.
Right. And you got to stagger it.
For the staggering, I really like that idea of staggering, and maybe 1 year you don't need that car, But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
One of the arguments that I think is in favor of putting this with the Board of Selectmen is the point the chief made. I don't want the police department dependent for essential vehicles on a fund of overtime, of special duty. I mean, if they need them, they need them. And they shouldn't ever say, well, we got to wait a little bit of this because we haven't been doing enough construction oversight in the past year. I mean, if they need the vehicles, the Board of Selectmen, it has the responsibility. It should be squarely on them to make sure that the police have everything they need to keep rolling and doing their duties, and not have that tied to a special fund.
I agree with Art. That's sort of that was what I was trying to say, nowhere near as eloquently as Art did at the very beginning.
He's always eloquent.
Yeah. All right. So I think procedurally, the question is, I don't feel a groundswell among our members to approve this proposal, but we need to do something. And can we do something at the August meeting, Amy, or is that?
Well, you can still do it tonight. If you guys are all in agreement that you would rather see the funds move into the capital reserve, then just move effective, tonight to change the use of the private duty fund revenue, instead of going into the general fund, it goes into the capital reserve as part of year end.
Yeah.
All right, but so there's two parts of that. That's fine. So that's an amendment to the proposal that was in our package. And the other is the dollar amount of the fund balance that we would leave. We would still leave a fund balance in the.
No, if you're not going to designate the private duty funds for a specific.
Okay. Oh, so then we don't. Okay.
You don't need to have a
Well,
fund balance.
You must have to have a little bit of a fund balance just to make sure you can pay the officers, right? Or you don't have an IBNR kind of thing?
We can float the cash if we needed to.
Okay, all right.
All right. So I then would be looking for a motion
I'll
to
move
what?
that.
All right. So now just for Karen's benefit, because she has to get this right.
Oh.
So the proposal, the motion that's in the package, and again, this is Linda's proposal, or Linda's motion, is to move effective July 21st, 2020 to eliminate the police vehicles fund and amend the use of the police private duty fund to be utilized as revenue source for funding. So we're going to take that out, right? We're going to say to eliminate the police
The
vehicles.
police vehicles fund, yeah.
Period.
And amend the use of the police private duty fund such that it maintains no balance beyond
Yeah, maintains adequate
to cover the costs.
to cover the costs of executing the private service,
Right.
the
then
private
fund-
duty.
yeah.
Period. And then fund balance.
In excess.
Yeah, take out the
in excess
next
of that
sentence.
amount.
Yeah, the fund balance in excess. Any excess fund balance will be transferred to the capital reserve fund for future capital needs.
Right.
And there's nothing that prevents the Board of Selectmen or Maria or Amy from designating within the reserves that this will be held aside and not spent. We're going to hold this aside in savings for police vehicles going into the future. Is that correct, Amy?
Well,
That's an annual decision.
yeah, right.
They can decide not to spend it on other things and hold it in the reserves, knowing that they're going to need police vehicles in out years.
Yeah,
I mean,
it just becomes part of the capital discussion.
Couldn't
Okay.
they ultimately, I mean, if the capital reserve wasn't adequate to fund everything that, whether it was police vehicles or other things, just make a request from
Sure.
us for a special,
Transfer from the general.
all coming from the same place.
Yes.
Ultimately, yes.
Right.
All right. So I'm going to use, so that's the motion on the table. I would need a second for that motion. You're muted, Kevin. I see you.
Thank you. I'll second the motion, but my question is do we have to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen to use the excess funds or no?
No.
No?
Now, the Board of Finance has the oversight as to the purpose of the special revenue funds and any amendments to them.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Lisa, you're?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And Derek? Okay. So it's the motion that Karen's writing down now and that was moved and seconded, we'll make sure we get the words right. All right?
Okay, Rob, I would just add that the minutes reflect your comments, that this is really about, or I can't make, perhaps it was Derek's or Art's, that the Board of Finance does not want the purchase of admin vehicles to be dependent solely on the use of the revenue source. It should be, because it's a regular expense, it should be funded, not dependent on an irregular revenue source.
Because it's needed.
Right. Exactly. Okay. I think we beat that up pretty good, but appreciate everybody's input. Well done. All right, moving on. Defined contribution pension plan and deferred compensation plan request for qualifications. Just to bring everybody back from where we were a month ago, quite a bit of discussion about this. There were a couple of things that needed to be done, which was primarily to notify the unions and the people in these defined contribution plans of the impact of the change of the manager in terms of the available investment alternatives. And that has been done, correct?
Yes.
Maria's on mute, but
Yeah, sorry. Yes. Yeah. We notified the union a couple of weeks ago. We had our labor council and Tyler both helped put together that communication and correspondence. We notified all of the union leadership about that. And to date, we haven't received any concerns from them.
Okay. And so then the second aspect of this is just to be on the record with why we asked Tyler to be here again tonight. With the advice from FIA, our financial consultant, and the ones who ran the RFQ, that this is in the best interest of all of the participants in the defined contribution plan to make this change. And just like you to be sure we have that on the record, Tyler.
Yeah, no, we did an extensive RFQ with a great internal team. I'd say that not only improved participant services, education, communication was outlined. I'd say sponsor administrative efficiencies is one aspect, but clearly investment flexibility and significant fee savings was also a key aspect of the recommendation. So we are on record recommending the ICMA implementation.
Okay. Does anybody have any other issues or questions relative to this? Linda?
With the people who are in the plan that yields the 4% and who will be losing that plan?
So, sorry, Linda, I missed the first section of that question.
I know that there was communication from Maria to the union. Do we know if the union communicated with the individual plan members who were enjoying a 4% return on their pension investments and are about to lose them?
So Linda, just quickly to that point, again, that would be their responsibility. And again, we just need to be extremely careful to not engage what's called direct dealing. So that, again, is why we would not correspond individually with members about something of that nature.
So we don't know if the union ever communicated with their members.
How, if that would be, purely up to them.
Okay.
So the fact of the matter, yeah, go ahead.
So, and I don't know the answers to these things, but I know it was like a 4% return and that there were also fees. So what's the effective return? Because I do just worry that we'll end up having people screaming, hey, I was getting this great 4% deal. It just disappeared. But maybe if we had an answer like, well, it was 4%, but you had this huge.
Now, the answer is that we have the power to do this and that we get advice on selecting the investment options and changing the investment options is within the power.
Zoom thing.
Yeah.
I keep freezing up. We need a better platform.
Yeah, I think, Tyler, do you have the effective rate? I think you have that.
I do. I'm just looking. So the current rate is at 4%. The ICMA rate is at 2.2%. The savings for record keeping is $83,000. So if you look at a $2.5 million pool that's currently in the 4% account, that would account for $50,000 per year, guaranteed at 4%. With $83,000, you'd be saving 33 across the entire pool. It's a net benefit of $33,000.
But for the individual, what's their effective return? I mean, I assume that fee is transferred onto them.
The fees transferred onto. So there's only a small portion of the individuals that utilize that 4%. Of the 12.5 million, say 2.5 are with the 4% vehicle. The rest of the individuals are being charged for the benefit of the people who are in that 4%. So if you look at the entire pool, if you're looking at 12.5 million, and I'm just looking at the 457 because the other vehicles don't get the 4%. Their benefit would be $50,000 per year. Obviously, it's compounding growth over time. The fee savings is more than that across the entire pool. So I'd say the entire benefit is seen through the reduction in cost over the reduction in the guarantee.
Another way of saying it, it's costing $83,000 a year to keep that 4% fixed rate.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I lost everything that just got said for the last minute and a half.
So I said another way of saying it is it's costing $83,000 a year to keep that 4% fee, 4% interest rate.
Of which only a small percentage of the people who are invested in the fund benefit.
Correct.
Right.
At the other's expense. We've been through this, and so
Yeah.
we've notified, and we have no, there was I think we've done the right thing. We've listened to the advice of our advisor. We're saving everyone in the plan money overall. The plan was not in market. The 4% deal was not a market deal. We're moving on. So,
Rob, also to the communication piece, I just want to commend Amy for putting it. It was now on our agenda twice. We did make sure it was on so there is a public notice that we were considering it twice. So it's been on our agendas twice.
Yeah. I think we've filled our fiduciary responsibility completely. All right. So again, I'd be looking for a motion to move effective July 21st, 2020 to replace the town of Simsbury's current defined contribution and deferred compensation record keeper, Mass Mutual, with ICMA.
So moved.
Need a second? Seconded by Derek. Moved by Kevin Prohl, seconded by Derek Peterson. All in favor say aye. Aye. Unanimous. All right. Thank you. All right. Next up is the proposed
Thank you,
fund
everyone.
balance. Oh, thank you, Tyler.
Thank you, Tyler.
All right. The proposed fund balance policy.
So this was just the next policy up for review. And at the last Board of Finance meeting, I had asked you all for your thoughts on where you thought the fund balance should be. And so it was kind of just, it was already a really good policy that written the way it was. So I just made a few tweaks, incorporated the guidance from the last Board of Finance meeting. So if you've all had a chance to review it, if you have any questions, if you want to move forward tonight, if you all want to review until the next meeting and send along some comments and changes and put it on the next agenda, that's fine too. So yeah, whatever you guys have, whatever comments, questions, open.
So I would suggest that we sort of think about this, read it. My initial reaction is that it's a very simple edit, but a meaningful difference in fund level from where we were the last time we did this policy. Going from 12 to 17% is a significant difference and has implications. And I think we should have a chance to think about it and then really talk about it in earnest at our next meeting if we can. Anybody else have comments or reactions or?
Lisa.
Yep, got it. Amy, could you please get us an updated red line version? I know the one you gave us has some additions that aren't highlighted in red that are actually new. So could we get a redlined addition for the next meeting?
Mine's red and green.
Yeah, they should.
But there are some additions that are on this policy that weren't on the old policy that are in black. So if we could get a true red line, that would be great.
Well, I need to know which ones they are because it is a true red line.
You have revised by the Board of Selectmen. That wasn't in our original policy. The effective date is new language that was not in our original policy. It's just a variation on what you did, but I wasn't sure if there were others. Those were two that I noticed.
Yeah, I noticed those two.
That was just the template that the town manager's office has now going forward. The policy documentation is all redlined. This is just the updated. They like to keep all of the policies in the same format.
Except this is not a Board of Selectmen policy, so it never has been, and the charter doesn't say it as the budget making authority for the town. This is always.
So we can just make that as a modification to change it or remove it.
Thank you.
There are a couple of typos, a couple of other things in here, but I think the fundamental thing is to be comfortable with the 17% in the range off of that.
Amy, how did you come up with 17%? I thought we were at 15. What was the thinking?
So Derek had mentioned 17% at the last Board of Finance meeting.
So she went with the highest.
I thought we were at 16. I'll take 17, but I thought there was general agreement around 16.
Do you hear 15? Do I hear 15?
For me, it's lower, so it's not general agreement.
No.
I know I'll be outvoted, and
Yeah.
that's okay. But
No, not necessarily. I'm at 15. I'm not at 17.
Sounds like 16's nice middle ground.
yeah, no, I would be at 13 or 14 myself. But and I think it makes sense to have a range. I mean, you don't want to have to spring into action the minute you are a little below or a little above. And so I'm okay with the top of the range being 17%. I'd like the bottom of the range to be a little lower so that we don't instantly have to start taking actions if we have one bad year and have to dip into reserves.
Well, so that's what I'm going to ask everybody to, I know everybody did, but I felt like the 17 is sort of like an upper limit at which then we have to act. And so the higher one doesn't say you can't have the 12, 13 or 14%. It's just, if you have more than that, but I'd like to go again.
There is language in here that says that if the fund gets to be less than 15%, you have to do things, right?
Yeah, we build it back up.
Yeah, so that's right. Yeah.
And so that's where my concern is.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So we were at 12 and 10, and now we're at 17 and 15, and that just seems like a quantum shift, and I'm not on that page.
So just for you all to think about, just remember the 15% came from Barry, our financial advisors, when he did a survey of AAA bond rated communities. They were all at the 15.5%. That's where that minimum came from.
At what?
At 15.5%.
15.5%.
Mm-hmm.
Amy, are they all the AAAs? You have acceptable levels within 1 year is a way to accommodate sort of Robin, Linda's concerns to get it back to levels within 3 years. Do AAA towns do that? Because that would give some flexibility to build it up.
I don't think there's any recommendation as to how fast you build it up. The 3 years is perfectly fine.
I probably feel better about that.
And so I also had a question about at the beginning of Roman numeral 5, you still have 10% in there. Was that an oversight, or were you really wanting to leave the 10% there? I wasn't quite sure why.
Roman numeral 5.
Right.
No,
that's an
Pardon?
oversight.
That's an oversight.
Okay, that's right.
Wow, good catch, Linda.
Good job.
Amy, and debt service funds, do we not have debt service funds? Is that why that's,
Yeah.
Where do we do those?
We do not have debt service fund. And if you recall, Judith had recommended that we do not have a debt service fund, that we accelerate stabilization fund.
I can't remember. Was she an advocate of a mill rate stabilization fund?
Yes.
That was her buzzword.
Right. We should not have debt service funds.
So where do bond premiums go then? When we get a bond premium, we deposit them where?
So right now it goes into the general fund, and then at year end, I make a recommendation to move it over to the capital reserve fund, and then we use it from that fund each year to fund the debt going forward.
Okay, so that's effectively the debt service, right?
No, debt service is a little bit different. Debt service is where all of your funding mechanisms and the debt would actually be paid out of the debt service fund. Our debt service is paid out of the general fund.
Ah, okay, that's what I was missing. Thank you.
Can I make two tiny little edit suggestions?
Mhm.
One is in Roman numeral 5, the following circumstances may justify maintaining a fund balance in excess of 17%. And the third one is exposure to natural disasters such as hurricanes. I would throw in there public health crises, just in deference to what we're dealing with at this very moment. And secondly, in Roman numeral 6, capital fund guidelines, in the first line, you need a comma after the word allow.
Okay, okay.
Tiny little nits. I mean, generally, I think it's fine. We just need to talk about what the percentages are.
Yeah. So just what we're doing so on the first page, number 3, it says can be used twice. And on the second page, at the bottom where it says 1, restricted fund balance instead of balance, since we're going to do those.
What was the first one, Rob? You broke up.
On the first page where it says number 3,
Yeah,
provide funds that can be used.
I got it.
All right, so everybody come prepared with their number, and we'll.
Just one more question.
Yeah.
This is a general fund balance policy, and I don't have a problem with the statement about capital fund guidelines and internal service fund guidelines, but why are they in a general fund policy? What's the thinking there, and should they be in their own separate? I mean, I'm fine with the substance of it, so I don't really care. I was just curious as to why they're in a policy called general fund.
We should probably just change it to fund balance policy.
Okay.
All right. Good deal. We're good. We'll deal with this in August. So communications, Amy shared with us the building report, and I think that all looks still pretty good, right? People are taking care of the houses they've been locked in for 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, try to go to Home Depot and get any pieces.
Yeah, the Pomeroy house included. So, and the Bloom Shapiro auditor communication, again, everybody should read that.
Yeah, that's just the standard
Committed to memory. So I did, Linda had asked, and I would say that the Meadowwood project, although it was just briefly touched on in Amy's report, as I understand it, is moving ahead. I think the big issue for the Board of Finance is that we have a strong fiduciary responsibility to the town to make sure we run the appropriate process of evaluating the impact of any of these kind of expenditures on the town from both a capital perspective and from an operating perspective going forward. And there is a requirement that we have adequate meetings with the Board of Finance about this and public hearings. And so I'm just a little concerned that as we think about a referendum for this, that we're going to make sure we have enough time to get the public hearings, the public information out and spread. I think personally that would suggest strongly that the Board of Finance or the advocate for this project makes a presentation of the project to the Board of Finance. And the sooner that gets done, I think the better. But I know you also are in the process of trying to get your grants and your other commissions. I don't really want to fight on this because we are the ones that are responsible for the financial impact of this. So I think having us be involved in the process earlier rather than later is important. But I we had asked for a timeline, and I think if we don't see a presentation from the Board of Selectmen until mid to late September, that feels like really rushed for us to get to consider it in a normal course, have public hearings and the like. So maybe I just ask Eric or Maria to comment on that.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. So we are, I think, wrapping up the process now of getting input from the various boards and commissions that we've requested input from. Maria, what's the timeline when we would anticipate reviewing that feedback? Would that be at our August meeting?
Yeah, that's the hope. So we had referrals out to about half a dozen committees and boards. We have officially received all of that feedback now. All but one entity provided a positive referral. The Zoning Commission, it was a split referral. Back to the Board of Selectmen. So there is commentary associated with those referrals. And we have been putting together that information for the board. We do hope to do that at the August 10th meeting. And then from there, right, it would really be starting to talk about the numbers. And there is a funding model that TPL did present in open session of the Board of Selectmen on April 6th. So that meeting is available on SCTV. That funding model was also in the packet. They represented that information at the Open Space Committee meeting on June 2nd. So we do have that sort of out there for the public to watch or to view the potential funding model online in terms of, again, that would be if we received all the grants that they anticipate, they're able to do the fundraising that they anticipate along with the town's contribution. So there was sort of, a sample model that they've presented in open session for us, but we could certainly bring that to the Board of Finance sooner rather than later.
Maria, that model was for 20-year bonding, I believe, correct?
Oh, no, so our 2.2 million would be how we normally do over, our 10-year period.
So I just echo Rob's thing, just in terms of we follow our normal process, it's a minimum of 2 meetings. Often there are 3, and there has to be 10 days notice from when we give paper for the hearing. So just in terms of your timeline, and I don't know when we need to complete this to get it on a November ballot if the Board of Finance forwards it. And I know I have a bunch of questions, and I know other members do too. And I've actually watched all the links that you sent. I've seen all the presentations, but it is important, I agree with Rob, to do a formal presentation to the Board of Finance, because that's often what the public will look to as we begin the discussion. It's also what forms the basis of the hearing that then follows. So it's part of our formal process. So I would just, I'm not sure, Rob, how you want us to get questions to Maria. It's hard to do that when we don't know when it's going to be produced. So I look to you, Rob, for guidance on how you want to handle questions.
We spoke with Amy on Thursday last week, and she did send the links, and we'll make sure that all the members have that. I think we will reply with questions from all of our members that are apparent at this point. But I think you should fully expect there to be a lot of questions after we have the presentation from you. And they'll, just to, at a high level, they'll go to tax revenue taken off by the purchase of the open space, realistic operating expenses going forward, and how that plan fits in with the operating budgets that we already have. And then I think what would be ideal would be to have this project fit into a continuum of prioritized projects that we're talking about for the town. And, just taking one project at a time in a vacuum, would you rather have open space or not have open space? Well, we'd like to have open space. But if there are multiple projects or wants and needs in town, how does this rank against those? And I don't know to what extent we'll have that backdrop in which to look at this decision.
Rob, I think that's a really important point, and it concerns me that there's this move towards doing a referendum, because referendum questions are typically in a vacuum and there's no context. And the public looks to us as leaders to become informed about these things and make decisions. because they don't have access to all of the information, and they don't have time, and there's no way to communicate effectively with the public at large. They're going to get there, see a question that says, do you approve the Board of Selectmen issuing a $2.2 million bond for this open space? They're not going to know relative to what. What are my other choices? What's it going to do to my taxes? Well, what other projects do I have to forego? So I'm not thrilled with the idea of pushing this to a referendum. That's the job of the Board of Finance and, the Board of Finance, frankly, to look at whether this is feasible.
Yeah, that's our responsibility. All right. Message sent. All right. All right. Anything else for the good of the order?
One very personal thing. I don't know if it's Comcast or what, but Zoom really, I have frozen out and will probably lost 15% or 20% of what got said in this meeting. It happens to me all the time. Is there a way that someone can work with me to either do a different platform or let me come into the hearing room or something so that I don't constantly lose it half of the meeting?
I would say with a preponderance of the freeze-ups were with you, Linda, and so there is some communication. Maybe somebody at the town IT might be able to help.
I think it's Comcast.
It probably is.
Comcast
You can always come here, Linda, as long as you're feeling well. We could have you in a different room.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Maybe it's.
Touch base with like Rick and Brett and see if there's anything that they can think of that might help you out.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it. Thanks, as I hate to keep freezing.
Yeah. Okay. Looking for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Linda, and seconded by Mr. Prowl. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
All right. Bye.
All right.